Someone is living my life, and I can't stop them. I used to think I was just another boring guy. Average job, average apartment, average life. Nothing about me stood out, at least. Not until people started seeing me in places I knew I hadn't been. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. A coworker swore he saw me at the corner store late at night, buying a pack of cigarettes. I don't smoke. I laughed and told him he must have mistaken someone else for me. But then it happened again. A week later, my neighbor asked me why I didn't wave back when she saw me outside our building. She said I'd walked right past her, headphones in, looking at my phone. That same night, I was actually across town at a bar with friends. I even had text to prove it. At first it was funny. We all joked about my secret twin, but the stories piled up. A barista told me I'd come in twice in the same morning, once wearing my office clothes, and once in a hoodie and jeans. A delivery guy insisted I'd already signed for a package hours before I actually did. People kept swearing they saw me at the mall, the gym, the subway. I couldn't ignore it anymore when my boss called me into his office. "Look," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "If you don't want to work here anymore, just say so." I blinked at him. "Excuse me." He slid a resignation letter across the desk, signed, with my name. My chest went tight. "That's not mine. It's your handwriting," he said coldly. "And you handed it to me yesterday." I stood there in shock. "I was at home yesterday. Sick. I even emailed you." He frowned, shuffled through his computer, and showed me the timestamp. My email was gone. Deleted. That's when I started to panic. It got worse. My girlfriend, Mia, stopped answering my calls. When I showed up at her place, she looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "I don't know what you're trying to do," she said. Her hands trembled as she tried to shut the door. "We already broke up." I froze. "What? No. We didn't." "Yes, we did." Her eyes filled with tears. "You came here 2 nights ago. You said things I don't even want to repeat. You made it clear it was over." I tried to argue, to explain, but she slammed the door in my face. I walked back home with my heart racing and my thoughts tearing themselves apart. What the hell was happening? And then I saw him. Or rather, I saw me. He was standing at the far end of the street under the flickering street lamp. Same build, same hair, same jacket. He looked up at me, and even from that distance, I swear I could feel his eyes boring into mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other. My brain couldn't process it. It was like looking into a warped mirror. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just turned and walked into the shadows. I wanted to run after him, to scream, to demand answers. But my legs wouldn't move. My entire body felt frozen. It wasn't a twin. It wasn't a lookalike. It was me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I turned over everything in my head. Was I losing it? Was I hallucinating? Had the stress at work finally cracked me open? But then, just before dawn, I woke to a sound outside my apartment door. A key turning in the lock. Someone was trying to get in. And I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, who it was. I let the person at the door in. Not because I trusted him, but because the pounding in my chest felt like it would split me if I stayed behind it. The door swung open, and there he was, the same as me, down to the faint scar on his knuckle from a childhood bike crash. Up close, it was worse than a strange coincidence. It was uncanny, like seeing my reflection move on its own. He stepped into my apartment like he had a key. He didn't look around like an intruder. He looked around like he belonged. His eyes scanned the books on my shelf, the coffee mug with the chipped rim I always kept on the windowsill, the spot on the floor by the couch where I always dropped my bag. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He simply put his hand on the back of the couch and sat, like he'd been doing it for years. "You're trespassing," I heard myself say. My voice sounded rough, as if it had been running for a very long time. He tilted his head. "Are you me?" The question should have been mocking, or witty, or a joke. But the way he said it, slow, careful, like choosing the right key for an old lock, made it feel almost clinical. I realized then that I was the one who had to explain, to someone who already knew everything about me. Explaining was pointless, but I tried anyway. "You can't be me. I was at home last night. I remember being at home." He shrugged. Memory is funny. People swap memories with the confidence of traitors. You can be certain of anything and still be certain of nothing. He actually smiled at that. A small, sad thing. "Look, I don't want to hurt you. I just need to sit." He spoke as if we shared history, as if the things he said were not revelations but routine conversation. I should have called the police. I should have pushed him out and locked every door. Instead, I sat opposite him and let him talk. Maybe I was too curious. Maybe I was already tired of fighting the impossible. "You remember the coffee shop on 7th? He asked suddenly. "How could I forget?" I said. You always spill the sugar. He laughed at that. My laugh, my timing. That struck me harder than anything. He could imitate me so well he made me feel like the parody. Like some cheap copy of something better. He told me things. Small, intimate things that no one else knew. The song that used to make my dad cry. The exact wording of my mother's voicemail from 3 years ago. The precise way I leave my toothbrush cap slightly off. He knew more than a stranger should. He knew the kind of facts that make a person feel naked. And yet, he said, calmly, there are things you don't remember. He said it like a diagnosis. At first, his intrusions were small and infuriating. He would show up at places I planned to go and get there first, taking my place in the world so naturally that people just accepted him. A former classmate hugged him and said, long time, man, while I watched from across the room. A cashier called him by my name and joked about my awful coffee order. My boss mistook him for me in a staff meeting and complimented him on a proposal I'd never seen. He had my face and my mannerisms and impossibly my life. Then the damage started. I got an angry voicemail from my landlord about a noise complaint from last Tuesday. I knew I had been at home. I had proof, photographs and timestamps. The landlord emailed me a video from the building camera showing someone who looked exactly like me leaving my apartment in the middle of the night. The footage was grainy, but the silhouette, the gait, the scar on the knuckle, it was me. My keycard logged a swipe at the front door at 2:30 a.m. I had been in bed. The bank called to dispute recent transactions. I watched a teller on surveillance video hand bundles of cash to someone who looked like me. My phone bill included a call I hadn't made to a number that belonged to a woman who left a message asking why I disappeared after promising to marry her. My emails started to vanish. Important messages that hours ago had been there were suddenly gone. Files I needed for work were replaced with blank documents. My social media pages posted status updates I hadn't written. One morning my phone alarm, labeled Mia, had been changed to finished. I scrolled through notifications and found messages from my friends asking why I had ghosted them, why I had lied about where I was on Thursday, why I had set a meeting I didn't remember planning. And the worst part was, no one believed me. The police were sympathetic at first. Look, one officer said, leaning back in his chair, we see lookalikes all the time. Doppelgangers are drama fuel, but we need proof. He tapped a pen against a notepad that read report hash. I had a list, timestamps that didn't match, eyewitnesses who insisted on my presence where I couldn't have been, security footage with my face turned toward things I had never done. The officer rubbed his temples and admitted, quietly, this looks like identity theft. He took my statement and left. But this wasn't identity theft. The me in those videos moved like I moved. He laughed like I laughed. He hitched his shoulder when he was nervous. He held the door for an old woman and then lit a cigarette, a ritual I had never begun. How could a thief be so intimate? I kept thinking that whatever he was, it wasn't someone pretending to be me for profit. It felt like someone practicing my life, rehearsing my role, then stepping into it and never stepping out. I tried to confront him in public. I followed him on a Tuesday to a diner where he often ate. I watched him order eggs and toast exactly the way I always did, over easy. Extra butter. He sat at the corner table and scanned the room, like he was collecting scenes he could later inhabit. I stood by the espresso machine, trying to decide how to approach a man who was me in every visible way. When he finally looked up and caught my eye, the world shrank to less than a breath. He beckoned me over like an old friend and said, we need to talk without cameras. We left the diner and walked. He led me to the riverfront where an old man fed pigeons. The old man glanced at us and then at me, and his eyes had a look I couldn't place. Recognition or memory or sorrow. You know who he is? I asked the old man, breathless. The old man shrugged. No, but I knew someone like him once. He told us a story. It was quiet, like a confession to pigeons. Years ago, he had a brother who looked the same as him. He said the brother had begun appearing in places he was not, taking on his life, and the family had torn itself apart trying to explain it. The old man's voice thickened. He left, he said. Or maybe he was taken. I don't know. People say the other one comes when something needs to change. He comes when something needs to change. The sentence echoed in my head all the way home. I wanted it to mean something simple, a metaphor for fate. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the way the doppelganger had moved in my apartment as if he'd been rehearsing my habits for years. I thought about the missing emails and the erased files and the way my friends and co-workers were folding his version of me into their memories. I thought about Mia's face when she told me we were over because of something I hadn't said. I thought about what the old man said. That this other one shows up when something needs to change. And for the first time I felt fear that bit past the surface. What did he mean by change? What had I unwittingly set in motion? I left my apartment early to check the building cameras again, to watch hours of grainy video until I either found a clue or sank into madness. I found the footage of him leaving my apartment at 2:30 a.m. A silhouette stepping out under a street light. There was a pause. He stopped, looked up at the sky for a long moment, and then walked away with the kind of certainty I had never felt. He was carrying something, a small, wrapped package. He walked with purpose. Then the footage glitched, a static ribbon across the screen. And when it cleared, he was gone. I rewound, replayed, scrubbed every frame. My pulse thudded. On the sidewalk beyond the light, for a fraction of a second, a figure stood completely still. It looked like a third person, or a shadow, or a mirror someone had cracked. The camera picked it up, and then failed to render it again. It was like the world itself couldn't hold that much sameness. When I turned the monitor off, I realized I had been sitting there until dawn. I had to go to work. I had to pretend. At the office, people looked at me with a softness I didn't recognize. Some avoided me altogether, like they feared catching something from my eyes. My manager handed me a printed schedule and said, in a voice that treated me like a problem, "You'll need to clear this up, okay? We can't have double bookings." I wanted to scream that I was not the double. I wanted to shout that someone used my face as a mask. Instead, I took a breath, put on a smile that felt like a costume, and walked to my desk. But I was already lost. The man who looked like me was out there, living my life, making choices that I had not made, and I had no idea what he intended to change. Later, when I came home, the apartment smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. On the kitchen table lay an envelope with my name written in my handwriting. Inside, a simple note: "You're running out of time." The note shook me. My hands trembled as I held it. "You're running out of time." I didn't know what it meant. Time for what? Time to disappear. Time to surrender my life. I had no clue. But I knew one thing. I had to confront him. I left my apartment, carrying nothing but my phone. I retraced the streets I had followed him on before. He was there, leaning against the same flickering street lamp where I had first seen him. He didn't flinch when I approached. He didn't smile. He just tilted his head, waiting. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Who are you?" He shrugged, a slow, deliberate motion. "I'm you. Or maybe I'm what you're supposed to be. I exist where you fail." I frowned, anger bubbling up. "I've never failed at anything that matters. You can't just take my life." His eyes softened, almost pitying. "I don't take life. I take the path that was meant for me, or for both of us. You've been given choices, and I make the changes you can't." "Changes? What changes?" I asked, stepping closer. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "You'll see," he said, finally speaking like a person delivering a verdict rather than a reflection. And soon, before I could respond, a shadow moved behind him. A figure, blurry, impossible to recognize, standing just out of the lamplight. I froze. "Time's up," my double whispered. Suddenly, I felt a jolt, like electricity crawling along my spine. The world tilted. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, I was standing in my apartment, alone. Everything looked normal. My coffee cup was on the windowsill. The carpet dusted with the same specks I always missed when I vacuumed. But something was off. I glanced at the mirror. My reflection looked back at me, but it wasn't quite right. The scar on my knuckle, gone. My eyes looked sharper, stranger, not entirely mine. My phone buzzed. A text notification. It was from Mia. "We need to talk. Meet me tonight." I picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. Hundreds of texts I didn't remember sending. Photos I didn't take. Conversations that I could swear had never happened. My life was full of evidence that I had already lost it to him. I realized then that the doppelganger hadn't just been visiting. He had been rewriting history, living my life in parallel, embedding himself into my past, my relationships, my mistakes, and my successes. A chill ran down my spine. I ran to the front door, ready to go find him, to demand answers. But the hallway was empty. No one. Just the faint scent of cigarette smoke lingering. I ran to the street. The city was quiet, too quiet. And then I saw him again, me, standing at the edge of the park, watching. He lifted a hand as if to wave. A small, calm gesture. One I would never make. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But before I could take a step, he disappeared into the shadows. I returned home. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The apartment felt like a borrowed space, as if it didn't belong to me anymore. Everything I owned, every relationship, every memory, felt tainted by his presence. Weeks passed. Friends stopped calling. Work became impossible. Every time I left the apartment, Someone, always someone, claimed to have seen me elsewhere, doing things I didn't do. Every time I thought I had a handle on my life, the evidence of his takeover reminded me I was already behind. And then, one morning, I woke up and the world was perfect. Everything was in place. My reflection smiled at me. My phone had normal messages. My apartment smelled like coffee instead of smoke. It was quiet, too quiet. I smiled at the mirror. Relief, finally. Perhaps it was over. Perhaps he had gone. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message. I've been living your life for years. Now it's your turn. I dropped the phone. The text glowed in the dim morning light. My reflection no longer matched me. The scar was back. My eyes were different. And I understood. I wasn't looking at a mirror. I was looking at him. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the faint sound of laughter. My laughter, coming from somewhere I couldn't place. I woke up hours later in my apartment. Everything seemed normal. And yet, deep in my chest, a gnawing certainty told me that this life, this body, my memories, were no longer entirely mine. Because somewhere out there, in the shadows, he was living my life, and I was about to live his.